Hello and welcome to another edition of the Blue and Gold Gridiron Show, where this week I'm super excited to have Coach Tony Holler, state championship winning track coach and the founder of the Feed the Cat system, which we have used at PHS since 2021, and something that I think has made it really so much more enjoyable for our kids and our coaches, and we've been more successful on the field. Like I said, I was telling Coach before we got on the air, I kind of dove into it during COVID, and I am all on board. I'm a full-on Feed the Cats Kool-Aid drinker to the 10th degree here, but I'm looking forward to discussing with Coach, talking about this, and I'm going to try to tie it into all sports because I have coached wrestling before. I've been the head wrestling coach here, coached a number of different sports, and I will at some point talk about the wrestling element because outside of maybe cross-country, I think wrestling is maybe the sport that would fight this the most because that culture of grind and pound is so ingrained in there. But we'll talk about everything, and I'm going to try to tie it into all the sports because I think this stuff is so incredibly valuable for kids and also for coaches in terms of your enjoyment. And I think I'm getting blessed to be in year 26 here, and I think if you're going to have a long career, this is 100% the way to go. So, but before I get into that, I just want to take a real quick moment to remind everybody that the Blue and Gold Gridiron Show is brought to you by School Funder. School Funder, the only online fundraising company in America that lets you keep all of the money your team raises. We've used School Funder twice in the last 2 years and kept everything minus the small 3% processing fee. There is no way you would give away 20% of the wins your team earns, so why do you give away 20% of their fundraising earnings? Call the people at School Funder, let them know the Blue and Gold Gridiron Show sent you, as it'll help the show. And as you're doing that, we've been growing our audience, getting more subscribers and that. So take a second, please like and subscribe. It helps us reach more coaches. We are in the middle here of season 2. We got a bunch of episodes lined up. I tried to tape a bunch of episodes in the summer because things will obviously get a little busy during the season, but we're in the middle here of season 2, and we've been really blessed to talk to so many great coaches. And like I said, I'm really excited to talk to Coach Holler today. And Coach, I know a little bit about your story. I love Son of a Coach. Sidebar, I wanted to be Brent Musburger growing up, and that's part of the reason I started doing a podcast, is because that's what was my goal. You are looking live at Atlanta's Fulton County Stadium, where the day the Falcons take on the Browns. That's what I wanted to do. And so anyhow, I was 16, and I was breaking down film with my uncle, who was a longtime coach, and his best friend on a Saturday, and I was like, this is awesome. This is really cool, and the coaching bug bit me, and I've been in it ever since. But I know you're the son of a coach, and one of my favorite things is listening to you kind of talk about that and the positive impact coaches have and different things like that. And unfortunately, sometimes the negative impact coaches can have as well. But Coach, tell us a little bit about your story.
Well, as you said, I was born to a coach. My dad was right out of college. He was a head basketball coach and coached 3 sports, and he was the AD as well at a really small school. That's the way they used to do it. You know, like I believe he started coaching in the late 50s. And if you really want to be a coach, you could either go be a freshman coach or something at a big school, or you could go and drive the damn car, you know, where you get to be the head guy. And I really think I did the same thing. I was a head basketball coach at the age of 23. And I think that there's something about being the head coach and being responsible for the losing. You know, like when you get beat, you can't complain about somebody else. It's you know, it's all you. And so it becomes this experimental trial and error. You start studying more. And so anyway, that's what he did. And he was a head coach 44 out of his 47 years in high school and college. And he had a remarkable longevity. I think he won 630 games and all that stuff. But you know what? He never won a state championship. He never won anything huge or anything like that. He could never really I say sometimes coaching is like Sisyphus. rolling the damn rock up the mountain every day, only to have it roll back on top of him. That was kind of my dad's experience, but he still loved it. Like Sisyphus, he learned to appreciate the rolling of that rock. He embraced it. And what happens is, as you know, you start falling in love with the stories, with the people and the stories. And you know, maybe what play you ran out of bounds is gone in the wind as you get older. But the stories can be told. My dad had dementia the last 6 years of his life, but one day he could barely talk, and I show him a picture, a high school picture of him, and he said, "Yeah, that was the first game I started. I was a sophomore in high school. I scored 16 points against East St. Louis at the Kiel Auditorium," and I was like, "Holy." You know, of course, that's kind of the Alzheimer's thing, where you do have some memories from 60 or 70 years ago, and you can't remember where the refrigerator is, you know. So, but the stories and the people, I think, that's what addicted me to the sport and to coaching. Most coaches' kids were good athletes. I was a good athlete. I was a quarterback. I was a basketball player. I was a track athlete. But I had many injuries, and I think I lost much more than I won in terms of my experiences. And so I went into coaching, and basically, like we all do, we all coach the way we were coached. And I was lucky, and I think my dad had something to do with this. He evolved a great deal in his 47 years. And he taught me that it was okay to evolve, that you didn't have to say, no, this is the way I've always done it. This is my identity, and I'm going to fight for my identity. So I evolved into something called Feed the Cats, which is a kinder, gentler a type of coaching that also produces winning. And if it didn't produce winning, it wouldn't be a thing. So that's kind of my story. And here I am at 66 years old, and I've coached for 44 years. And I'm just as excited about things as I was 44 years ago.
That's so awesome, Coach. And one of the things I thought was interesting that I've heard you talk about, and it was a little bit, it resonated with me because I was the offensive coordinator for my coaching mentor, Tom DeMassa, and I had totally resigned him. I'm going to be on Coach DeMassa's staff for my entire life, and I was good with that. I was calling his offense, and I was so excited about it. And we got fired. We didn't win enough games, and we got let go. And I think I've heard you talk about when you talked about being a head basketball coach. When you lost that job, that was a little bit maybe of a defining moment in your career. And I think it is because Coach DeMassa was my coaching mentor, so I understand the W and L going on your name, but I took all of that like I was the head coach.
Yeah.
So it was just as personal for me when we got let go as anybody. And they haven't had a winning season in the 17 years since. I'm not bitter or anything. But anyhow, but talk a little bit about that, because I think that can, make a difference in coaches.
Well, everybody should get fired at some time. It's you don't like going through it. I remember when I called Dad to tell him I was fired in 1990. He had to hand the phone to my mom because he got choked up. And, he cried a lot in his later years, Alzheimer's type stuff, but he didn't cry as a young man, but that drove him to tears. And so, but a firing, the same school board that surprisingly fired me after 3 consecutive 500 or better seasons, we were doing okay, and they fired me, and it wasn't expected. The same school board begged me to become the head track coach 1 month earlier. And I had 4 little kids, and my wife was a 2nd grade teacher, and we just couldn't move. So my basketball career was over. And so I had to choose a new identity, and as luck would happen, I think in my 2nd year of being the head coach, we got 3rd in the state, and we had a couple great athletes. And as you know, when you win, losing can motivate you, but winning can too, and I became really interested in track and field as we started getting successful. And even with that success, I was doing it the old school way. And so about 10 years later, I'd already won a state championship, 3 state trophies, and I just changed everything in the way we did things, where we weren't grinding, we weren't running repeat 200s. All we did is sprint and jump, and it worked really, really well. And that was kind of the beginning of Feed the Cats. But I really think my dad got fired twice as a basketball coach. Those kind of things, those really hard things you go through, I think are great teachers.
Absolutely. Interestingly enough, Coach, my wife is also a second grade teacher. I've heard you on your podcast talk about, or on your show talk about, I forgot the term you used of what that is in education, like the marathon running of education. I don't remember exactly, but.
We called it the Death March.
Okay,
That
all right.
Monday through Friday, if you are a classroom second grade teacher, we call that the Death March.
Jeez,
And
by the end of the week, exhausted.
elementary teachers have to raise their hand to go to the bathroom. I mean, it's like they're treated like they're in the second grade or something. No, wait, you are an adult professional, but yet, as you know, high school teachers are treated a little bit like they're older or more responsible. And then, I don't know how college teachers get away with it, but they teach, like 3 or 4 classes a week, and they don't have 100 labs to grade and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it being a teaching family, as you know, is the greatest life in the world, because you have the same school days and vacation days as your kids. You're working the same hours. There's never a day where we don't come home with stories. It's never boring. So yeah, I'm looking back. We had trouble financially, but looking back, what a great way to have 4 kids.
Absolutely. I'll tell you what, I was thinking about this last year. We had a good win and got off the field, and both my daughters came up and gave me a hug, and I was like, I don't make a lot of money, but I don't know if there's anybody out there that makes 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times as much as me, has had as much fun at their job as I am right now. And I remember you talk. I don't know if it was one of your son is a really successful coach and one is in a different field. And I think I may have heard something. He said something. They won the state championship, and he was brought to
Yes.
tears. And he said, "There's nothing at my job that would make me that happy."
Yeah, the story of my 3 kids. I have 2 kids that are two of my 3 boys are really good coaches, and coaches' kids are good coaches. I mean, they grew up with it and all that kind of stuff. Seldom are they really bad, and plus they have the feed the cats mentality, which also really helps as well. But my middle son was in advertising. So the story, as you said, my oldest son Alec, they won the state championship, and it was. They'd had frustrations in the previous years, which made it very emotional when they finally won. And I gave him a hug, and we both cried. And when we got home, my daughter says, "I've never seen Alec cry before." And then my son Troy says, "Nothing in my job will ever make me so happy I cry." And I thought to myself, I don't know what that is, but there's an emotional thing that is built into our jobs, if we do it right, that is unlike anything that's out there. I can't imagine, investing in a stock and seeing it go off the charts and crying because of that. But yet, when I'm watching a 4x4 at the end of a track meet, and I have a guy running down the guy in front of him and passes him, I get teary-eyed. I get, I don't understand what that is, but I'm so happy and proud that there's such an emotional part to coaching, and I think it's we need to remember that.
I definitely think you need to remember that. The next part here, I think about some of the stuff as I was younger, and like I said, I was never a crazy grinder, but I got so much wrong, and it's really embarrassing now to think about how much I hurt their speed and how much I would like to go back and coach some of those teams, because I still have great relationships with some of those guys, and I'm like, gosh, we'd have been so much better if I wasn't a bonehead. And it's frustrating for me to think about it now. But Tell me a little bit about what coaches get wrong. And I will say that I love listening to you always, but the only time I ever get, sometimes when you go to football coaches, I'm like, I think you need to be looking at some of these other teams too a little bit here. But and I'm not just talking about football coaches, but what do coaches in general get wrong?
Yeah, and that's a great point. There are so many football coaches now that do the sprint-based football and the feed the cat stuff. I think they're the smartest people in the world. They're also some of the most competitive and most stubborn, and some of them are the most old school and all those things. So the first thing that I think is important to say is that you can get a lot of things wrong and still win. There's a couple reasons for that. One is that dumb is undefeated against dumber. If other teams are doing dumber things than you, then you got a pretty good shot. Even if the other team's smarter than you, if you have better players, you're probably still going to win. So, and then the third thing, and I think both of us can relate to this, that even coaches that I criticize often have such charisma, my football coach in high school, rest in peace, was a guy that I'd take a bullet for. I'd run through a wall for that guy. Looking back, he was he was not a good football coach. But he had that it factor. So I think it's important to realize that you can do a lot of things wrong and still win. The worst coaches can still have enough success to justify their BS, the dumb things they do. That's just life. But I love what you said about cringing about the stuff that you got wrong, because if we cannot look in our past and say, "Oh God, I'm embarrassed about that," then we haven't grown. We haven't evolved. And I think that coaches have to evolve. I've learned more in my last 10 years than I learned in my first 56. So, and then that was like growing up with a coach and everything. I've learned so much by being around this network of people that I found myself with. So what do coaches get wrong? They practice too long. They burn the steak on Monday and expect to be good on Tuesday. They fall in love with the word effort, because effort is the only thing that kids are capable of if they're too tired to perform. So what I say is that Feed the Cats program performs in practice. We do not go through a fatigued, sloppy, sore, depressed practice and get better. So we better design our practices, be short enough with enough built-in recovery, with the idea of a wave-like practice situation where if you want a big-time game-like practice on Wednesday, you can't kill them on Tuesday. So you have to be low on Tuesday to be high on Wednesday. And just like you don't want to kill them on Thursday night if you have a Friday night game, you can't be high. You can try, but you'll go downhill, you'll get hurt, you'll get slow, all those things. I think a lot of coaches fail to sprint, and sprinting speed is the tide that lifts all boats. As you get faster, you get better at everything else. And just because speed becomes the priority in a sprint-based football program does not mean it's the majority. You prioritize your family, but you probably spend more time at work than you do with your family. So your family may be the priority, but it's not the majority of your time. So the great thing about a Feed the Cats approach for football, and you know this, is that it's kind of a way to cook. It is parameters. And the reason why people like you are willing to say we are a Feed the Cats team is it's still your team, Cody. I mean, you are still running the offense, defensive schemes. You're designing personnel, depth charts. You're assembling your staff. You're making 1,000 decisions that have nothing to do with Feed the Cats. Feed the Cats is just your intention to make sure your kids are the best they can possibly be on Friday night, physically and mentally. And a Feed the Cats program reduces injuries because shorter practices, fewer collisions. Sprinting has some type of weird health benefit that I don't understand. I think when kids practice less but practice better, They look forward to practice, which makes you a better coach. I tell people, I'm huge on coaches' wives, because the average football coach's wife lives a miserable 4, 5, 6 months every year. That's typical. And a lot of it's because the coaches are obsessed. They practice too long. They have to be mean. They have to cuss in practice, and they have to punish their kids. And they're like slave drivers during their practice. And so then they go home. And how do you go home and be a nice guy? You're probably going to kick the dog and your wife, or vice versa or something. And that's not good. But when you start practicing an hour and 40 minutes, and your kids are happy when they get to practice and happy when they're leaving practice, you have a tendency to be a happier human when you go home to be a husband and a father.
Absolutely, absolutely. One of the things, and this is not necessarily a feed the cats type of thing, but when we were talking about the kids enjoying it, one of the things that we added to our workouts, they get chocolate milk when they leave every day. They get a protein bar. They love that stuff. We, in the off season, give them peanut butter and jellies on their way to class and different stuff like that. And that's something that has really added a lot to our program. The one thing I'll say, Coach, that when I was going through your stuff, and I love it, and you always talk about performance over effort, the one thing I would say is I disagree with you a little bit on one element. I think you've redefined hard work. I don't think you're against hard work, because I would argue, and this is just my opinion, it is very easy it's miserable, but it's easy to trudge through a 3-hour practice. Hey, we screwed up the trap play or whatever. Run it again, line it up, to stop, go up there, coach it, da-da-da-da. It is very difficult, even when you go 90 minutes, which is our practice time is about 90 minutes. And that's when game weeks, our 90-minute practice is Tuesday. On Wednesday, we're an hour. Thursday, we're an hour. On Monday, we do a walkthrough and then watch film. So we don't actually put helmets or anything on Monday. So we're fully invested on all that stuff. But I would argue it's harder. In the beginning, it was harder to get guys, because I was like, I promise, guys, I'm not lying. You got to give me what you have, because we're leaving after 90 minutes. We're not going to keep going. And I would almost argue that's harder. Establishing that with kids is harder, because they've been told that so many times, and it was kind of BS. And then they end up doing all this, and then at the end of practice, and I shudder to think of our Mondays. Our defensive coordinator played for me, and when he came back, he's like, "No gasser Monday." I was like, "Oh gosh, don't remind me. Don't remind me of what we used to do that way." But I really believe you've redefined hard work, because
I think you're right. I had a guy, the cross guru, a guy named Jamie Monroe. He opened the door for me to consult with probably 7 or 8 of the top lacrosse programs in the NCAA, and he just kind of sat me down one day and said, "You got to stop talking bad about hard work. That's just not going to sell. Talk about redefining hard work." And I said, "Okay, all right." So, but I think intensity is hard. I think repetitions are easy. I think that performance is hard. I tell my 4x1 team, if we're doing handoffs, instead of saying, "Okay, we're going to do 10 handoffs today." No, that's the way old school football coaches used to do. Run each play 10 times. I say, "No, we're going to do one perfect handoff." And we spike up and we video, and sometimes it's like an A-, and the kids are like, "Oh, coach, we need another one." I go, "Nope, A- is fine." And they'll argue with me. They'll want to do another one. And it's just kind of flipping the way things are done. And where kids start to take ownership. And I think that consistency is hard. And the only way you can be a great Feed the Cat school is if you build performance on a foundation of rest, recovery, sleep, and nutrition and hydration. And those things, if you're not doing those things, you don't have a chance. So instead of practicing for 3 hours, maybe we should practice an hour and a half and then talk for 15 minutes about being ready for tomorrow. What is it going to take? I do stuff like I tell kids to wake up every day and make their bed. And they're going, "Why?" I said, "Well, because every time you accomplish something, you get a little hit of dopamine. And dopamine's good. It makes you feel good. Your arms and legs move faster. Okay, then you go drink 2 glasses of water. That's another win. And then you make sure you have a breakfast that has protein in it. That's a win. And so when you go to school, you're on a winning streak. You're on a winning streak, and maybe that will continue throughout your day. That's not easy. That's not easy to develop good habits. You just look at the other way around. Somebody wakes up, their room's a total mess. They feel like a loser. They don't drink any water. They have a Pop-Tart or something, and then they go and fall asleep on their desk first period. Doing it the right way is not easy. And so we are redefining hard work, but I think if you start really thinking about what we're trying to teach kids, we're teaching them lifelong lessons.
Absolutely. Coach, I don't mean to be so agreeable, but one of the things I've loved most about this show is little nuggets within that I take and have used with our team. The other day I had an interview with a Hall of Fame coach from Michigan, and he told me, Coach, put your most reliable guys in the summer as far as attendance on special teams. And I was like, oh my gosh, that was like an epiphany to me. Because then if you're doing one or two things, you're not reteaching it all the time. Those guys have already kind of established that. And you just said intensity is hard, reps are easy. And I might get that. I might put that on a board and put it somewhere in our team room. Because intensity is hard, reps are easy might be our new motto, because that is
if you think about games, half-ass reps don't win for you, and I see just so many teams. I'll tell you a quick story about cramping. Feed the Cats teams typically don't cramp. Even though they don't do any conditioning, they don't cramp up game night because they have intensity during practice. There was a guy named Willie Taggart at Florida State. He was like a 30-point favorite going into the first game. I think it was against Boise State or something. And he gets beat. There was 13 cramps. Florida State had 13 cramps in the game. And it was a joke, And so after the game, he says, what can we do if our guys won't listen? They didn't hydrate. They didn't blah, blah. They didn't drink pickle juice. They didn't have enough Gatorade. They, blah, blah, blah. And what I wanted to say is, Willie, when you were practicing 4 hours, when it was 100 degrees in Tallahassee, how many cramps did you have in those practices? And his answer would have been none. Well, what's the difference between that 4-hour practice in the heat and the first game in the heat? And hopefully he could figure it out, because what it is that you were going in third gear in practice, which that's the only gear you can go in if you're practicing too long. You got to coast early, you got to save in the middle, and then at the end you just slog through fatigue. And then you go fifth gear in a game, and your nervous system freaks out. So yeah, I think that intensity thing, if your practice doesn't look a little bit like a game, you're not really getting in shape for the game.
I coach the linemen, and that's one of the big things we do now. And we're working combos. We do a lot of combo blocks and that skill. And when I say a lot, I mean now what I'll do is if we got the varsity going, I'll say, hey, the tight end and tackle are going to work a combo now on a backer. And as soon as it looks like a game, you're done. If that's in one rep, you're going to go stand over here for the rest of Indy. And then the JV's going to come up. Or then we're going to go to the varsity guard and center. And then the guard and tackle maybe. But if it's one rep each, but it looks like the game, then you're done. Because that's kind of what we're going for. I think Feed the Cats has been something that has been easy to get the players to invest in. One of the stuff that I'm not sure, it's kind of like the chicken or egg, because thankfully our AD is awesome and she paid for me to get the RPR stuff done. So I'm not sure if it's all Feed the Cats or if it's all the RPR stuff. And I'll be honest, that one is harder to get people to buy into. I think our coaches and sometimes our kids, I'll catch them. I'll go, no, it's not. No, it should hurt a little bit. Get in there and do it. But that one is a little bit harder to get guys to buy into. But it has helped our program so much. Is all the RPR stuff we've done. But I do think getting them to buy into that has taken a bit of time, because I know there's still a few. Most of our guys are good now, but there's still a few players that I'll get on because I'm like, and they don't giggle or laugh or anything because they know better than that. But you do have to really sell that. Talk
Yeah,
about
and I
that
think
RPR.
there's not really. I know a lot about Be Activated, which was the precursor to RPR. Matter of fact, I'm having Douglas Heel on my Feed the Cats podcast next week. I haven't talked to Douglas in like 7 years, but I wrote like 9 articles about him because that's who came over from South Africa and taught me and Chris Gorfist and several other people this way of combining belly breathing and these Chapman pressure points from the 1890s or something, and it is kind of voodoo like. But the people, however you try to implement it, what I try to do is I try to get my kids in a classroom, and I think it'd be really hard to do that with a huge group. So maybe your seniors, start with your seniors, because I think there is trickle down when seniors buy in. You're going to be a lot better off. But we do a couple things, like the shoulder strength thing, where you hold your arm out and you test strength. Okay, you're strong as can be. You could hold 200 pounds on your arm, and then we have them do 4 air squats and 4 shallow breaths, and all of a sudden they're weak as a kitten, and the kids are like, "Oh man, like, is that real?" I said, "Let me give them his strength back." And so, you have them do a masculine pose, like shooting an arrow, and a couple good belly breaths, and they're strong as hell again. So I think there's certain buy-in things that can happen, and then the other thing is just that the implementation. I know my son Quinn. They do like one RPR thing, and then they do a speed drill, and then they do another RPR thing, and then a speed drill. And what we do is we circle up, and our captains do it, and I threaten them. It's the only time I threaten my team, but I say I will kick you out of practice immediately if there's any talking or any giggling. So I mean, you're right. Sometimes you have to threaten kids. And you kick one kid out of practice, and seldom will you ever have to again. And so I say, give me 90 seconds of your attention, and we just do zone 1. We hit the 2 glute spots, the psoas spot, and the diaphragm, and we breathe along with it. And I don't think that's optimal, but I think my trade-off is I can get it done with seriousness. And it's interesting that every sprint-based program I've talked to, anybody that says they feed the cats in football, I've yet to speak to somebody that does not do RPR. I don't know if you saw this, but the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, for a game last year, their linemen were standing around barefoot, which I didn't really understand the whole grounding thing about if you're barefoot standing on the ground, there's supposedly, I don't know, some negative ions, or there's some type of voodoo type stuff that you are better off. We all need to stand not on concrete or on carpet, but barefoot on the ground some. So anyway, they were grounding themselves, but they were also doing RPR. And the commentator said, why are these guys rubbing their beards? And what they're doing is they're hitting that glute spot underneath the earlobe. But yeah, they all had beards, and it looked like they were just rubbing their beards. And so anything like that, where you're giving kids a tool to become less stressed, and fear is not a state of performance. Stress comes from fear. Sometimes pre-competition, we think it's excitement, and it's really fear. And so we really need to fight against the high adrenaline levels and breathe and stay quiet pregame, and we will be more durable. We will be able to think better. Our field of vision will be much better, and I think you'll have a healthier team.
I know you'll have a healthier team. That's one I'm 100% definitely sure of. And it's interesting you talk about being quiet in pregame, and I cannot tell you how much I dislike these screaming jumping jacks. We do silent J's in there, and I tell our guys all the time, no one has ever won a game yelling in pregame. I promise you. They may have, tackled well, blocked well, caught the ball well, run well, but they didn't win the game because they yelled better in pregame. But so that's something I'm with you on 100%. You've talked about it a ton here a little bit, but get into a little bit more about, and I kind of want to touch on, a sidebar story. I've been our head wrestling coach before, and I got named the head wrestling coach not because I'm a wrestling guru, because I'm far from it, but because I'm a decent coach. I know how to be around kids. I'm not going to do anything that's going to get on the front page of the paper or anything dumb. The AD knows that. So I was asked to be the head wrestling coach, and there were some guys that had far more wrestling knowledge than I. And to be honest, I regret that season, not because I didn't have fun, but because I let them push that wrestling mantra of just beat everybody into the ground constantly to the forefront. And I don't think it made us better. And I think I see this, and I've talked to you about this a little bit before we got on the air. There's still some coaches that do some dopey things, but I think it's far less. I would argue the percentage of coaches that have bought into sprint-based football and feed the cats is much higher than some of the other sports, as a matter of fact. But wrestling, it was, we were constantly, every single day, those kids were dragging themselves out of practice, and I didn't do a good enough job kind of being the head coach, and because I didn't have the knowledge of some of these guys that were better wrestling coaches. But maybe give me some ideas you have for sports like that, wrestling, any sport that pops into your head, that ways they could maybe implement this. Let me know.
I love talking about this stuff. The wrestling, of course, I can remember back in the 70s, wrestling was far more barbaric than it is now. I mean, my friends used to wear trash sacks, like plastic suits. They used to go lay on steam pipes, and they took laxatives. Like it was just constantly cutting weight, and they got hollow-eyed. Like football players that played at 170 would drop 30 pounds in 4 weeks. And I think the feed the cats stuff would be the opposite of that, because you basically, a feed the cats program prioritizes performance in practice and performance in meets or games or races or whatever. So that when you prioritize like that, tired is not the goal anymore. It's not how tired you can get. It's how strong and quick and explosive and smart, all those things. I've only heard of one high school wrestling program, and that was in Wisconsin, that told me they went 100% feed the cats. And they had a lot of blowback, as you can imagine, from parents, even more so than the athletes. But some of the athletes rebelled too. I mean, it's the vision quest sport. It's the, I've seen guys running 20 laps, around our indoor track after wrestling practice. I'm like, what does that do? If anything, I think that would hurt that kid's performance at the next match. So what you do is you get strong, fast, explosive. You make practice the best part of a kid's day, which in wrestling, for me, that would be hard. But when kids are good at something, I think you could gamify wrestling, and make it. When I say gamify, make practice more like the match. Make practice anything that we can measure in practice, we do. Anytime we can compete, we do. And that's to me the gamification of practice. Instead of just doing stuff, you do stuff with intent. And I think that over a long grind of a season, and even seasons, if you're doing things right, it's still long. So it's still kind of a grind, even if you're doing less. I think that you'll be healthier and a better wrestler. So what I would say is let's focus on building, bottom of the pyramid, rest, recovery, sleep, nutrition, hydration. The next level is athleticism, which has nothing to do with your sport. That sprint, lift, jump, bounce. Those are athletic things, have nothing to do with your sport. A wrestler may say, well, coach, we don't sprint. Yes, but good athletes sprint fast. And the better you are as an athlete, the better you will be as a wrestler. So you do those things. And then you start prioritizing their health by having practices that do not burn the steak. And I think that as you do that, the kids will start looking forward to practice more. And when practice becomes the best part of their day, I think they become a better wrestler. And you mentioned cross country, which I would take the same pyramid: rest, recovery, sleep, then get athletic, sprint, lift, jump, bounce, and then start doing your sports stuff. You're going to have to run a lot to be a good cross country person. But I would argue that if we could make a cross country kid a better athlete, they will be a better cross country athlete. And then we get into sharing athletes throughout multi sports, where if every coach in your school, and I just got done last month talking to an entire school's staff, and basically to have the common thread, we're going to build athletes. We're not going to build football players and basketball. We're going to build athletes, and then let you as the basketball coach build a basketball player. You as a football coach build a football player. And when we start doing that, I think, let's just say if I had a kid, I would like for my kid to go through that type of program. Not the type of program where the football coach thinks you're a football player 12 months a year. The volleyball coach, like you have to sign your name in blood and some contract that you're going to be a 12-month volleyball is one of the worst offenders. You know how bad basketball is. But once you start doing that, I think all of the sports will benefit. And so the last thing I would say about cross country, we had kind of an old school cross country coach. He was young, but he was a great runner, all that stuff. Basically, all they did was run. Everything was about running. And in the last 5 years, they've done so much more med ball throwing, wickets. They time fly 40s. They do hurdle over and unders, working on their hip. They lift weights. And they went from being a team that looks like cross country kids, like frail, they won't look in the eye, blah, 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 into looking like a basketball team. They have shoulders. They'll look you in the eye and they'll shake your hand and squeeze it. We've become athletic, and that's why we were second in the state the last 3 years, and we will win the state this coming year.
Coach, I always think some of the kids make fun of me a little bit because I love watching athletic kids do pogo jumps. Like, there is something just uniquely. I told you about our young man that was a 3,000 all-purpose yards throwing the ball and rushing the ball quarterback that I think will be the starting point guard in New Mexico this year. My day was infinitely better watching him do pogo jumps because it is just fun watching really athletic people do certain things, and jumping is one of them. That is absolutely awesome. I'm blessed. We have an awesome basketball coach. He does a fantastic job. And I don't think he knows what it is, but I think he is a feed the cats coach, even if he doesn't know it. And I think that's part of the reason last year, probably two of our best player and another one that was in the top 3 or 4 were all basketball players. And we added a few more basketball players this year. So I think that's, and I think part of it is it's not miserable, it's fun, because this is a game and it's supposed to be fun. I will say early in my career, we're really fortunate now. Ironically enough, our track program was a Feed the Cats program this year, and our girls won the state title, which is not a coincidence at all because we've always had really athletic girl stuff. But early on in my career, I had different guys in weights classes, obviously, and I always was a guy that wanted everybody to do as much as they can. So, and one thing, if you have class, you got to dress out, and we'd do squat. They'd have squats there, and I'd be like, hey, listen, you don't have to do any weight of any kind whatsoever. You can put on 25s, and this is a 300-pound squatter. You can put on 95, do a couple little fake sets. I'll give you all your points. You're good to go. And the track coach was an old-school gentleman and not a bad guy, but they would inevitably, all of them would get hurt at the start of track season because they did all this stuff, and then he would say, it's because you got them lifting weights. I go, he can squat 365, and he did 3 sets of 5 with 95 pounds. I can assure you that is not why he is hurt right now. Maybe the 10-200s could have done it. I don't know. But what can you do if you're a coach in another sport and you want your guys to do everything, but they're ending up in a program that's beating everybody down and getting injured, and that's tough. So, do you have any advice there?
I'm consistently disappointed with athletic directors. I think they see themselves as a desk job, a guy that has to say no to coaches, a guy that puts out fires when there's problems, and I would never want to be an AD because I don't like doing that type of work. But the part about being an AD I would love is to come up with a vision for the entire program and for the benefit of kids, and convince coaches that the reason why all those kids got hurt is volume. That's why. That same coach that got everybody hurt by doing long, slow volume, like 10-200s and things, would probably criticize me because on our day one, we sprint. We sprint on day one. We time on day one. And that blows, like college S&C coaches, it blows their mind because they have to be careful because, man, if somebody got hurt, they're $300,000 a year job or $1 million, they might be out of there because they're not the head coach. They're just the S&C guy. So it's so much safer to lift and condition than to lift and sprint. And so I think that's one of the reasons why sprint. Plus, S&C people are typically not coming from a background of speed. They come from a weight room background, probably a slow background. That's why they love the weight room. So anyway, there are those problems. So what we could do, hopefully, is to get those kids out there and sprint them, but in such low doses that nobody gets hurt. On day one, I basically sprinted on day one for 25, 26 consecutive years, and we've never had a day one injury, ever, not one. And that, like I said, blows people's minds because they think that you get hurt by running fast. And really the way you get hurt is through volume, and that's in any sport. And almost every old school coach did twice as much in the first week as they should have. I don't know if you heard the podcast I did with a guy named Pedro Aruza. It's my sprint-based football podcast. Randolph-Macon College, a D3 school in Virginia, third best overall winning percentage, third best in the nation in the last 6 years, a Feed the Cat sprint-based football program. His first 4 practices last year, and I think we can talk to all coaches like this. His first 4 days, they went 60 minutes, 60 minutes, 60 minutes. On the 4th day, they rested. That blows people's minds. You say, well, I bet they're terrible. No, they're 57-6 in the last 6 years. They're okay. I bet they're soft. No, they are violent on defense. Tired people, Lombardi said fatigue makes cowards of us all. 100% true. But yeah, coaches go out and get their kids tired every day and think they're doing them a favor. So tired is the enemy, not the goal. And so I think that once you start understanding that the opposite of what Pedro does, I don't know if you went through double sessions as a player, but I did. The first practice, the first morning practice of the year, and we went through 10 days of doubles, ruined all the rest of the practices. We were beat up, sore, half injured, scraped up, mentally depressed. And that was okay with coaches because it was kind of like the Marine stuff. We're going to break you down, build you back stronger. And the week of the first game, they backed off and we started practicing 2 hours, 2.5. And they wondered why we still looked slow in the first game. It's because they burnt the steak so bad. Oh, and by the way, for that first game, we were missing 5 starters.
This is one, and Coach, you have changed a little bit of my, not a little, a ton of my weight room philosophy along with some other guys that I follow and have gained information from. That's one of the things about being the head coach of the smaller schools. I'm I've gotten certified in the National High School Strength Conditioning, which is a really good one too. I think they do a really good job. USA
Yeah.
Weightlifting, all that stuff, I think does a really good job. But one of the things that is interesting, and I agree and partially disagree, and I'll tell you why. And you've said it. You've said fast kids are always strong, and I agree with you. The strongest kid is rarely the fastest. That, I will say this. I have never, not once in 25 years, had a kid that was our fastest kid on the team that wasn't pound for pound in the top 2 or 3. One of the ones you did where you were talking about things in the weight room you can do to improve speed, trap bar deadlifts was something I wasn't a big fan of, and we've implemented it. It's definitely been helpful for us, and I've studied that, all that stuff. But I do think fast kids, they're always really strong. And maybe not – the other thing that because you have changed a ton of my weight room stuff, but one of the things that you did – you do a cheer, they run through and the kids are cheering for them and you time them, and I loved that. And I was we don't ever do single rep maxes, but we still do 4 rep maxes, and that is the only reason why. I'm not sure it helps us at all, other than the fact that when Timmy's getting ready to squat and he gets that 4th rep and the entire team loses their mind on him, that creates a moment for kids. And to me, that's something we should all be after, is creating moments there. If you can create a moment of that much fun in a practice, in a workout, that's a good thing. So talk a little bit about that, and because I want to dispel the myth, because sometimes I think football coaches get turned off by Feed the Cats because they think you're anti-weight room, and you're not. But I think the great part about it is you can do less than a minute of speed work the whole week and get way faster. And that's such a huge benefit. But maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I go back to that thing. Tony Villani, a good friend of mine, he's the shred mill guy, and he trains NFL guys. But people thought that, that his talk about game speed, as being 14 to 17 miles an hour, and me being a pure speed guy, somehow we hated each other or something. But it's the opposite. Tony says that you need to prioritize speed, but the priority is not the majority. I said that once already here, but like the weight room can still be the majority of your time, but when we prioritize speed, all we're saying is we have to do it when we're fresh. We cannot train speed tired, beat up, depressed, sick, all those things. You can, but you're not going any faster. So basically, when I say prioritize speed, that just means that you need to sprint before you lift, not after you lift. And of course, sometimes we don't live in a perfect world, and you have to lift during the school day and then sprint after school, whatever. But we need to know what's optimal. And a lot of people are dissatisfied because I don't think there's anything in the weight room that is critical to speed itself. I tell people I cannot go in and pick a lift and have your whole team do that lift and then pick my 4x1. I have no idea. Now, if we did pogo jumps and box jumps, I say, you're going to be on my 4x1. So
You
jumping
real
and
quick.
jumping and the ability to bounce off the ground is really, really important to speed. So people confuse that with me saying the weight room's not important, but we know that the weight room is absolutely essential. Boyd Epley, when he became the first S&C guy in the history of the world at Nebraska, their tackles weighed 220 pounds back in the 60s, 220 pounds. And the average guy could not bench 220. The average guy on their team could not bench 220. So weightlifting changed the world. It absolutely changed the world. So weightlifting is important. It's just, I say be general in the weight room and be specific. Be extreme in speed training and be specific in practice. I think there's a lot of different weight room plans that can work. My only warnings, 2 things. One is never let the weight room interfere with speed training. And people say, what do you mean? Well, like if you did something in the weight room on Monday that made everybody slow on Tuesday, look yourself in the mirror and say, okay, I need to learn something here. We need to do Monday's workout after our Tuesday's workout instead of the day before Tuesday's workout. The other thing is, I think football coaches really need to hear this, and that is never let weightlifting mess up the in-season sport. As a track coach, I hear the horror stories of guys forced to max squat on the day of a conference track meet. And I'm like, that coach should be fired for making them do that. I mean, you don't, nobody would want to lift heavy the day of a big race. And so, you need to be smart in your training, but I think you can do that. And, but no, weightlifting has to be, it's one of the 4 pillars of my athleticism. You have to lift weights.
I think always you never want to create a secondary recovery issue, and that's the thing that we really strive to never do, and it's something that I've tried to get our coaches on board with, and sometimes that reputation of the football coach is going to beat them down proceeds, because I've worked with some of the teams that I've been the strength coach for other sports on our campus, and it's been wonderful, and I enjoyed it, and I'd like to do it more, but I think sometimes they think I'm going to be training them for the weightlifting team, and that's not correct. The other thing I tell our kids all the time, and I'll tell any kid in any sport all the time, is we're doing this to make you better at said sport. So we're not doing this for you to be the world champion weightlifter at all. We're doing this to make you better at basketball, better at football, like you've talked about, building athletes. Coach, I only got a couple things. I really appreciate your time, but a couple more. You've talked about simple being good and kind of elaborate how, and I can relate to this. I was a young coach and I really thought I was smart. I got to probably year 12 to 15 and I thought I was a complete idiot. Now I don't think I'm a complete idiot, but I know nothing, but I should take that back. I know a little bit more than nothing. But talk about getting to that point of being simple and effective in your coaching kind of journey.
Well, Thelonious Monk, a famous jazz musician, once said, "Simple ain't easy." And I love that quote too. It takes a heck of a lot of work to make things simple. My favorite basketball coach of all time is a guy named Don Meyer. He's no longer with us. But he said there's 3 stages of coaching. There's blind enthusiasm. There's sophisticated complexity. And, just to define those things, every coach comes in enthusiastic, probably thinks he knows more than he knows. He just knows what he went through. He doesn't know what everybody else is doing, but they're really enthusiastic. They can't wait, and you need people like that on your staff. But then you go to 5, 6, 7 clinics, listen to a couple podcasts. Now all of a sudden you're talking the talk. You're talking that high level talk of big time coaches, and you can really talk over the heads of the parents. By really impress them with all and stuff. But what is not what you connect with kids. I mean, that sophisticated complexity doesn't work. So we're aiming towards mature simplicity. And it's an art to get to the point. I was told one time, I taught chemistry, and I was told by somebody who observed me, a department chair, the greatest compliment I've ever had as a teacher, said, "You are a great connector with kids." And I get chills just saying it, like, yes, that connecting with kids. And I've also been criticized as a chemistry teacher by lowering the bar or dumbing down a sophisticated scientific subject to make it more understandable. But what happened was my kids learned it in a simple way. They liked it. We did a lot of chemistry. We are what we do, not what we hear. We did chemistry, and kids would typically look forward to taking AP chemistry, or they would go home and say, I think I may want to be a pharmacist. And that is the true measure of getting kids to the next level, is you build a fire. The only quote that sat on my teacher's desk was, "Education is not the filling of a pail. It's the lighting of a fire." That W.B. Yeats. And if you think about that, we can learn as coaches that if kids they are obsessed with what they love. They're really good at cell phones, and they never took a course ever on cell phones. They got good at cell phones because they like cell phones. I like cell phones. I think they're fascinating. And so we need, and football coaches sometimes have a hard time with this, we need to try to make, especially summer practices, more enjoyable, more lovable, I'm not saying they're easy, but the best way to get buy-in is to have practices that kids look forward to. You don't have to work that hard with games. I mean, games were the heaven on earth, even when you went through the hell of the grind. The games were fun, man. Friday Night Lights, all that stuff. So you need to have a simple enough message to connect with kids, and then light the fire.
Coach, I love that. You always talk about the magic of the game, and I tell our kids this. The thing for me is different is the game for me is I don't enjoy the game as much as the preparation. Now, the preparation doesn't have to be hard. I love the preparation. The games to me is usually just a chance for me to be an idiot. So, I mean, it's not as much fun for me as practice.
You're being very honest here, Cody.
But I love the preparation because there's not that pressure of the game. This is going to come out in the season, so I just want to, if I can, and maybe you can talk about this just a touch. I think all of our goals as football coaches should be for this game to be around for generation. I think us making it more fun and more. One of the things I think football, if you don't hear anything that I talk about or coach, we're inclusive. Only so many guys can run on Coach Holler's sprint team. Only so many guys can make the basketball team. Only so many guys can make the baseball team. If you want to be a part of something, we will keep you in football. And I think if you're listening to anything out there, coaches, make that an enjoyable experience for a kid. Make that something they want to be a part of. That's our advantage is we're inclusive. We need those bodies. We want those bodies. Don't make it a miserable experience for them. Make it a fun experience for them that they enjoy. And help the game be here for years and years and years and years and years. Because obviously I'm biased. I think it's the greatest game on earth. And I love all sports. I do the announcing for our basketball teams. I've been involved in a ton of sports, coach wrestling, coach a number of things. Been the strength coach for our tennis team. So I love all sports. But if I think football is inclusive, and I think that's something coaches need to embrace.
I think you're right. I think that the whole inclusive thing, I don't know of anywhere else but in sports does this really happen. And I think football is beautiful because you have the big number and you don't cut. I do cut from my sprint team, but they can go to the distance group. But I always say in track, it's the only sport where you have freshmen, sophomores, juniors, seniors on the same team. Now, in Illinois, we only have boys, which is weird. We're not co-ed. But still, there's a lot of difference between a 2-miler and a shot putter and a sprinter. So there's this unique variability thing. And then, in football, we don't cut at Plainfield North. We will have over 200 kids out for football this year, and because it's a healthy football program. But kids will be forced to be teammates with kids that they otherwise may never be friends with. I was just talking to a guy that wrote 4 amazing basketball books. And he said one of the things that basketball gave him was an opportunity to really be around black culture. That he would have, if not for basketball, would never have understood black culture. And he has actually written 2 books on the black culture with basketball, and they're beautiful books. But I just think that different. I don't know how diverse your school is, but Plainfield North, we have like 50 different nationalities, 50 different languages spoke at the dinner table at people going to Plainfield North, and you're just forced to be around people that aren't like you, and then we have that caveman feeling of going on a hunt or a journey together and sitting around the fire and telling stories about the last hunt, the last journey. And, like we said earlier, those stories about sports will never die. I mean, you won't remember anything about your senior prom or your junior prom, but you'll remember everything about that final game that you lost in overtime. You'll remember what the play was. You'll remember what it felt like, and then you also have the wins. The losses and the wins. But the main thing we have, it comes from, like you were saying, like when we come together as a group, and even bad football teams kind of have that group feeling. There's that team thing going on. I just think it's special. It's stuff that, let's just say this, that I could not teach that stuff in my chemistry classroom. It only happens in sports.
100%, Coach. I was just laughing the other day with a friend of mine, and I we were in a game, and we were one of the dads taught at our school, and his son played on the other team at downtown a little bit, and we were playing them, and we loved his dad. His dad was a good dude, good teacher. They were taking it to us in the game, and he said, my buddy called his dad a name. His dad was a weenie. Not anything bad. But anyway, the funniest part about it, and we still laugh about this, we're in the hallway getting ready to go to class Monday morning, and this gentleman, who was a science teacher, as a matter of fact, said, "Mr. Carlson," to my friend, and he goes, "I hear I'm a blank," what he had called him, and we just started dying laughing, and it was really funny. Again, it wasn't a bad name, but anyway, it was just stuff like that sticks with you just like it was yesterday, that didn't have anything to do with the actual result of the game or anything like that. But the last thing, and I'm going to share this with RAD and all our coaches, you have improved the lives of so many coaches as a result of this style of coaching. And I think that is and I love, obviously, I want to make a huge impact with kids, but I think the impact you've made with coaches is underrated and maybe even just as big, because it has really helped so many coaches. I was talking to a young coach on our staff the other day, and he was talking about, I think I might want to become a head coach someday. And that was a big compliment, because I don't think he had considered himself to be maybe a guy that would be a head coach. And I said, well, just remember, if you're going to do this for 30, 40 years, you got to lay it out so it's something you want to do. Because if you dread it, you're not going to last. And I just want to thank you for that. And I hope any coaches out there listening, because this is coming out during the season, regardless of right now, whether you're 0-2, 0-3, this will come out in the middle of September, or you're 3-0, headed towards a great year, you can make it a good experience. Listen, winning's more fun. Everybody knows this. There's nothing I can do about that, or coach can do about that. But please make it an enjoyable experience for kids. And thank you again, Coach, for everything you do for coaches, because I think it's hugely important. So thanks, Coach.
And just the last comment, you're talking about, even if you're going through losing seasons, my dad used to say the mark of a great coach is somebody can motivate a losing locker room. And if you think about it, if we can keep the game fun enough as we're losing, we might be teaching kids more about life than what we can teach when we're winning. So you always have an important job.
Absolutely. But again, Coach, I really appreciate it. I had a ton of fun here. This hour and 10 minutes just flew by. So as you guys are in that season, compete, have fun, enjoy yourself, and we'll see you next time for another edition of the Blue and Gold Gridiron Show.